BCSS is about families, helping families like my own. My oldest son has schizophrenia. One of the things I do is our PEP program, which is a Partnership Education Presentation. And what we do is bring with me a person of lived experience, which is a person living with a major mental illness, and then a family member who's living with a loved one who has a major mental illness. It's not about clinicians, it's not about statistics, it's about families helping families. We need to destigmatize mental illness, major depression, or bipolar, or schizophrenia. What does that mean? We're able to enlighten people, then that makes people less afraid, and then they will be able to talk about it.
My youngest son, he's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. There was just a lot that has happened in the span of about 7 years, and if I could go back and document all of the things from beginning to end, it would probably be helpful to somebody else. Parenting on its own is difficult enough. There's a lot of judgment. Your son's not behaving like the rest of the kids. What are you doing wrong?
As a sibling, it's been unique. I have to recognize that he's not trying to be an annoying little brother. This is not him trying to make things difficult. It's his mental illness. I think siblings are often left out of the conversation.
Being in recovery of mental health and substance use has paid off. I am now working full-time. I'm just a normal human being that has a disease that needs treatment and needs medication and self-care and support and love, and that don't be afraid of me because I tell you I'm hearing voices.
Schizophrenia has a specific symptomatic presentation, usually hallucinations of some sort, either auditory or visual. Could be seeing people that are not there, could be hearing people that are not there, smelling things that they think are poison. It takes a long time to get a proper diagnosis.
It's very difficult to get somebody to take mental health issues seriously. The number of times I had a medical professional say, "You just need to get your son off of drugs." How do I convince somebody that is 100% sure that there's helicopters following them and the cat's emitting Wi-Fi signals to get off drugs? Because they're not seeing things properly. They're not seeing things in the way that the rest of us are seeing them.
You only hear about mental illness when people are talking about, overdose crises, people who are homeless, violence. We don't hear about anything other than those worst case scenarios. Why not address things earlier?
I still intermittently get auditory hallucinations and smell hallucinations, but I manage that through techniques of self-care and as needed medication. But I have to be diligent. I still have delusions. I don't live them. I acknowledge them, but I don't let them rule me. I do have to take pharmaceutical medication for the rest of my life. I'm also diabetic, so I have to take medication for my diabetes. People don't look at me as terrible for taking medication for my diabetes. So the same should be said for mental health.
Depression, there's people who are depressed because something happens, like they lose a job or somebody dies, and that's normal depression. So clinical depression is very different than just a sadness.
People say, yeah, I had depression for a while. That's not my brother's journey. Like, everyone has mental health the way everyone has physical health. We can have, a good day or a bad day the same way we can have, a cold or be feeling under the weather. But you wouldn't compare feeling under the weather to someone who is experiencing, cerebral palsy or cancer. You're comparing two different things.
Nobody wakes up one morning and says, "You know what, I'm going to get a shopping cart and I'm quitting my job. I'm going to get a drug addiction and a mental health issue, and That's what I want to do. And there's people out there that seem to have the opinion that that's a choice. It's not a choice.
For people who have bipolar, they're dealing with major depression and a mania. So they go into what looks like psychosis, which could look like schizophrenia, and they go into a mania that makes them have tons of energy and do things that are maybe very not good for them.
You don't live in reality where everyone else is living. You live in your own deluded reality, and it becomes your paranoia rises, your fear rises, your anxiety rises, your serotonin levels drop, your mood changes, your brain, your neurotransmitters aren't connecting properly, that you're not getting the dopamine's off, the endorphins are off, the serotonin's off. That's why we take medication, so these things can be leveled out and give us the chance to not be in psychosis and not to be living our delusions as if that was what reality is.
Anosognosia is really hard for people to wrap their heads around, harder than it is to even, say the word. He can't comprehend that he is sick.
One of the biggest things I always remind myself with my son is that he didn't pick this. Like, he didn't just wake up one morning and go, I'm going to pick from a grab bag of mental illnesses, and this is what I want to be afflicted with the rest of my life.
In our society, we have to treat the fear that people have with mental health. Because if you look at media, how media portrayed schizophrenics as a personality disorder, that they're 5 or 4 different personalities, when someone would call you schizo, they're saying your personality is split, you're double-minded. That's actually not the case at all. People who we see on the street or who are accessing mental health, we can't look at them as a lens of they're hopeless.
The highlight of my work with BCSS is that I am able to speak with families who are exactly like me when my son was diagnosed with schizophrenia and I hadn't a clue on what I was going to do about that. And I know what I hear from the families saying that, thank goodness we have somebody who understands. Thank goodness we are able to speak to you in a way because other people don't understand, and we can't speak to anybody anyway because people are afraid yet. And we're trying to help people at BCSS not be afraid of the word schizophrenia, look at it as we would look at any other illness and treat it like we would treat it any other illness.
Sometimes it's nice to have someone to talk to about my experiences with my brother, because I know who he is inside, and I know, like, I trust him, I love him, and I know who he is. And I think having that safe space to talk with people who understand, not just can understand, but are really listening and going, I've been there.
This affects a large portion of Canadians. Nobody wants to go through this sort of stuff alone. There is a certain amount of comfort going like, oh, you've had the same problem? Well, funny thing, I've had the same problem. Let's sit down and compare some notes.
In our society, we have to treat the fear that people have with mental health. I feel like people can learn compassion, can learn empathy, can learn connection, can learn acceptance, can give grace, can flourish when they're supported and loved and encouraged. So I feel like in community, we could learn how to remember the connection that you have with your family. If you have good relationships, wouldn't you want that for people who are struggling with mental health? I would hope so,